The first time he grabbed my throat, his face was calm, like he was turning off a light. When I met Elliot, I told myself I'd finally found the kind of steady love people write about in birthday cards. We were in Leeds then, both renting small flats that smelled faintly of other people's cooking. He worked long hours, I did admin work for a clinic, and our days lined up in that ordinary way that feels safe. It wasn't always rosy, but we got along. We laughed at the same dumb shows. We made Sunday pasta and ate it out of bowls on the sofa, legs tangled, the window cracked open for fresh air that never really came. Looking back, the first warnings weren't loud. They were tidy. Like he wanted our life arranged, the way he wanted the cushions arranged. He started with little things. My phone faced down on the table. Always. If it buzzed, he'd glance before I did, just a flick of the eyes. If I went to meet a friend, he'd ask what I was wearing, not in a teasing way. More like he was checking a list. The questions were constant, delivered softly, like concern. Where I was, who was there, when I was leaving, when I'd be back. At first I answered because it was easier than explaining why I shouldn't have to. I remember one night, rain sliding down the kitchen window, him standing behind me while I rinsed a mug. His hand came around my waist, but his grip wasn't warm. It was measuring. I felt my shoulders tighten without choosing to. My breath got shallow and high in my chest, and I hated myself for it. He kissed my neck and said, almost gently, that he didn't like the way my colleague looked at me at the office party. I laughed, because it sounded ridiculous. He didn't laugh back. The next day, he bought me a silver necklace. Thin chain, small pendant. He said it was so people would know I was taken, and I forced a smile and put it on. It sat cold against my collarbone. I kept wearing it because taking it off felt like starting an argument I didn't have the energy for. After that, his moods became the weather in the flat. You learned to check the sky before you opened a door. If his keys hit the hall table too hard, my stomach would drop. If he set his phone down face up, screen lit, I'd go quiet automatically. He never called it jealousy. He called it respect. He called it boundaries. He called it love. The first time he touched me in anger wasn't even a punch. It was a shove, quick and sharp, like swatting a fly. We were in the living room, the lamp on low, the TV flickering blue across the walls with no sound because he'd muted it. I'd come home 10 minutes late because the bus was delayed. My cheeks were cold from the wind, and I was still pulling my coat off when he stepped into my space. He asked what took so long. I said the bus. I even showed him the transit app, thumb trembling, screen smudged from the rain. He stared at it like it was a lie made of glass. Then his hand hit my shoulder and drove me back into the sofa. Not enough to bruise, but enough that the breath left my lungs in one ugly sound. The back of my thigh caught the edge of the coffee table. A jolt of pain shot up my leg, and I sat there, blinking, trying to make my brain agree with what my body already knew. He told me not to make him look stupid. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared at the steam curling out of the mug I'd left on the table, like the world could still be normal if I focused hard enough. My fingers dug into the fabric of my jeans until my knuckles hurt. A minute later, he knelt beside me and smoothed my hair back like I was a child who'd fallen. He asked if I was okay. He said he'd had a rough day. He said he hated how much he cared. I nodded because my throat felt locked, because my skin was buzzing, because I wanted the moment to be over more than I wanted to be right. After the shove, I started doing strange little rituals. I kept my keys in my fist when I walked up the stairs, metal biting into my palm. I sat at the edge of chairs so I could stand fast. When I texted friends, I did it in the bathroom with the tap running, like the water could hide me. That night, when he fell asleep, I lay on my side facing the wall. My heart kept thudding like it was running from something. I could still feel his hand on my shoulder, not as a memory, as a pressure. I told myself it was a one-off. A mistake? Stress. Anything but what it was. And in the morning, when he made coffee and kissed my forehead, I almost believed myself. After that, time stopped moving forward and started looping. I learned his patterns the way you learn a bad neighborhood. Which hours were safe? Which tones meant danger? Which version of him was walking through the door? My body adjusted before my thoughts did. My shoulders would creep up toward my ears without me noticing. My hands stayed slightly clenched, even when I slept. He didn't hit me every day. That would have been easier to name. Instead, it was the unpredictability that hollowed me out. Some weeks passed with nothing worse than sharp words and long silences. Other weeks, something as small would tip him. A look, a question. A pause that lasted half a second too long. The second time he used his hands, it was my arm. We were standing in the hallway, the narrow one between the bedroom and the bathroom. The light was off, only the glow from the street lamps outside sliding across the carpet. I tried to walk past him. He caught my wrist and twisted, not hard enough to break anything, just enough to remind me that he could. The pain was quick and bright, like static. My fingers went numb. I remember staring at the framed photo on the wall, a landscape from a holiday we'd taken early on. Blue sky, open space. It felt like a joke hung there to watch me. He let go immediately, always immediately. That became his rule. Never long enough to leave marks. Never long enough to look uncontrolled. After, he would step back, run a hand through his hair, breathe out slowly, like he was calming himself down for my sake. He'd say I pushed him. He'd say he didn't know what came over him. He'd say he was scared of losing me. Sometimes he'd cry, real tears, hot and messy, dripping onto the front of his shirt while I stood there holding my arm, nodding, my mouth dry. I stopped trusting my own reactions. If I flinched, I told myself I was dramatic. If my stomach twisted when I heard his footsteps, I told myself I was anxious for no reason. He helped with that. He was very good at explaining why my fear didn't make sense. He suggested therapy, couples therapy, said it would help us communicate. I agreed, because saying no felt dangerous in a different way. In the therapist's office, the air smelled like eucalyptus and clean paper. He sat close to me, his knee touching mine, his hand resting lightly on my leg. He spoke calmly about misunderstandings, about stress, about how deeply he loved me. When it was my turn, my throat closed. I talked about feeling overwhelmed, about tension, about wanting peace. I didn't talk about his fingers around my throat. I didn't talk about the way my vision had blurred, not from pressure, but from the sudden terror of realizing how small I was. After sessions, he'd squeeze my hand and thank me for trying. Then, in the car, he'd tell me which parts I'd said wrong. At home, the violence became quieter. A grip on the back of my neck when we argued in the kitchen. A shove into the mattress during sex when I froze instead of responding fast enough. His weight pinning me, his breath steady, controlled, never angry. That was the part that confused me the most. I expected rage. What I got was focus. One night, I dropped a glass. It shattered across the floor, loud and sudden. I jumped. He didn't. He just looked at me, eyes flat, and said my nerves were exhausting. I knelt to clean it up, my hand shaking so badly I cut my finger. Blood welled up, bright against the white tile. I stared at it longer than necessary, like it proved something. He handed me a towel without speaking. Later, alone in the bathroom, I locked the door and sat on the edge of the tub. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with wet sand. I pressed my thumb into the bruise forming on my arm and waited for the pain to ground me. It didn't. I started losing time in strange ways. I'd walk to the shop and not remember the streets I'd taken. I'd sit on the sofa scrolling my phone, staring at nothing, until my battery died. My reflection in mirrors started to look unfamiliar, like someone I used to know. The turning point didn't come with shouting or broken things. It came on a Tuesday evening after dinner when the plates were still on the table and the room smelled faintly of burnt garlic. We were arguing quietly. About money. About nothing. I tried to step away again. He stood in front of me and put his hand around my throat. Not squeezing, not shaking, just there. His thumb rested under my jaw. His fingers fit easily. My breath caught, not because he cut it off, but because my body remembered everything at once. The room felt very far away. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock. I looked at his face, waiting for anger to flare. It didn't. His expression was calm, almost bored, like he was holding a door shut, not a person. In that moment, something inside me went still. I realized he wasn't losing control. He had it. And I understood, with a clarity that felt cold and sharp, that there would never be a last time. After that night, I moved through the flat like a ghost pretending to be a person. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or threaten to leave. I woke up the next morning with a strange, heavy calm settled over me, like a fog that had finally stopped shifting. My body felt sore in places he hadn't even touched. My chest stayed tight, but it was different now. Less panic, more resolve. I watched him carefully, the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way his eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I noticed how deliberate everything was, how controlled, how practiced. That was when the fear changed shape. I started planning in silence. I kept my phone charged, always. I stopped deleting messages from friends. I memorized where my passport was, the feel of it inside the drawer under folded jumpers. I made small excuses to leave the flat alone. Errands, longer walks, anything that gave me space to think without his breath in the room. My body still betrayed me sometimes. My hands shook when I packed a bag halfway, then unpacked it again. My stomach turned liquid when his mood shifted without warning. At night, I lay rigid beside him, listening to his breathing slow, counting the seconds until I was sure he was asleep. I didn't tell him I was leaving. The day I did it was ordinary. That was the strangest part. It was late afternoon, gray light leaking through the windows. He was at work. I stood in the bedroom holding my keys, the metal cold against my palm. For a moment, my legs felt so heavy I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. My heart was pounding hard enough to make me lightheaded. I pressed my feet into the carpet and waited for the room to stop tilting. I took only what I could carry without drawing attention. A change of clothes, my documents, my phone charger. The silver necklace came off last. I unclasped it slowly, fingers clumsy, and set it on the bedside table. It made a soft sound when it landed. Too loud, I thought, even though the flat was empty. When I closed the door behind me, my breath caught. I expected panic to flood in. I expected guilt. What I felt was quiet. Outside, the air was damp. It smelled like rain and exhaust. I walked without looking back, my steps uneven at first, then steadier. Each block felt unreal, like I was walking out of a story that didn't belong to me anymore. I went to a friend's place. She opened the door and took one look at my face and pulled me inside without asking questions. I sat on her sofa, hands wrapped around a mug I didn't remember her making. The heat soaked into my palms. I stared at the wall while my body slowly realized it wasn't in danger right now. That night, I slept in fragments. Every sound jolted me awake. But no one grabbed me. No one blocked the doorway. No one told me what I'd done wrong. In the days that followed, the reality settled in layers. There were messages from him, calm at first, confused, then angry, then pleading. I didn't respond. My chest ached constantly, like a bruise being pressed over and over, but I held on to the image of his face that night in the kitchen. Calm, certain. That memory kept me from going back. I reported him eventually. Not because I suddenly felt brave, but because carrying it alone became heavier than speaking. Saying it out loud made my hands shake. My mouth went dry, but every detail anchored me to the truth. My body knew what had happened, even when my mind tried to soften it. Freedom didn't arrive all at once. It came in small, quiet moments. Standing at a bus stop alone, rain tapping against the glass, and realizing no one was watching me. Waking up without that instant jolt of dread, sitting in a room and feeling my shoulders drop for the first time in years. I didn't feel happy. Not at first. I felt empty, then tired, then slowly, real again. Sometimes I still think about how easily it could have continued, how close I came to believing his version of love completely. That thought still makes my stomach tighten, but I know this now, in a way that doesn't waver. He would never have hit Mia for the last time. Leaving wasn't dramatic. It wasn't heroic. It was quiet, shaking, imperfect, and it saved my life.